Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're back on the dev server looking at a new French vehicle that is going to be coming to the game. This is the ELC BIS. It's going to be a rank 4 battle rating 6.7 vehicle, and it's going to be sat right here on the right hand line in the tank destroyer tree, surprisingly enough, between the CA Lorraine and the AMX 50 Foch. The ELC BIS is a tiny vehicle, and because of that, it has a hell of a punch for it, but also has some unfortunate factors to it, which will make it a little bit more challenging to play than you may think. But for me, this is one of my favorite vehicles of the update. I've been looking forward to it ever since last year when we saw the model of it, and I'm glad that it's finally here. The ELC BIS, when it comes to its armor profile, is pretty rough, looking at only 40mm being the highest amount of armor on the front of the vehicle, and not too much angling either when it comes to the vehicle itself. It also has pretty good gun depression though, especially since it has a tiny silhouette. It's going to be super easy to hide this thing from enemies as you're moving around and doing stuff with it. And even though it's not very survivable from the front or from the sides or from the back or even from above, when you only have 8mm on the turret, meaning it's going to die very quickly, what it does have is access to some really nice features. So first of all, you have the 90mm. So this is another light French tank which has access to pretty decent firepower for its size, and the 90mm DN15 fires some heat FS at 320, 277, 160. So at 6.7, this is going to go through pretty much anything that you can fight, and as long as you aim for stuff like ammo or key components, you're going to be able to knock out a lot of the vehicles that you face. Another thing this also has access to is smoke grenades, and it gets 4 launches, 2 on either side of the turret, in very similar fashion to a lot of other French tanks that are around the place. And the one thing it doesn't get though, which I've got to say is incredibly surprising when it comes to the vehicle, is it doesn't get access to scouting. I thought this thing would, but instead they've labeled it as a tank destroyer instead of a light tank, and that means that it doesn't get scouting. At the same time though, they could still give it scouting, just not the light tank status if they feel like it should be a tank destroyer and use it for dailies and stuff like that. It also doesn't get a coaxial or a top machine gun. The 90mm is all you get when it comes to the general gun itself. And when we have a look at the inside, you get a 2-man crew. And they're both sat in the turret. Well, kind of. They're actually sat in the turret and also the hull, meaning that you can only turn the turret so far either way before you're not able to turn it anymore because of the configuration of these two right here. Now, the gun itself, as you can see, you got a commander and you got a driver. So the commander is basically the commander gunner loader situation for this vehicle. And if you have a look at its reload, which is right here, it's not the best, but it's not the worst for a 90mm. It's pretty standard, especially if you have a one-man band in the vehicle. So the base is 8.7, with the top being 6.7. This will be competitive with the vast majority of vehicles that you face at this BR, which have similar cannons. And the other thing is, because this thing is so small, it's only 8.9 tons, with a 180 horsepower engine, it can actually canter about the place pretty effectively, being able to get up to 80 kilometers an hour, and going backwards in an okay click, but, you know, nothing to really shout about. I really like those vehicles like the EBR that can go as fast forwards as they can backwards. It just feels really, really useful to be able to get in and out of situations. But I suppose sometimes you've got to come back to reality and realize that most vehicles don't have the best reverses. It has pretty good turret traverse for what it is, but once again, you do have the issue that it can't traverse too far. And the actual vertical aiming speed is pretty rough on it, but because it's quite a low vehicle, that shouldn't really matter too much in general. So when we have a look at the vehicle itself, it has some big positives and it has some, you know, pretty bad negatives as well. There isn't really a setup for it where you can really say that this vehicle is going to take over the meta, but we do have examples in the past where vehicles similar to it have been able to make a decent, I suppose, chunk into the meta because of their general usability. Most recent small boys, which have been doing really well, are the Weasels, mainly the one with the ATGM, because it's so small and people have got so used to thermals, they can't see the damn things, when even if they walk past them, they can't hear them either. So when you've got a very low silhouette vehicle and decent firepower, as long as you don't give away your position at the wrong time, you can actually get away with a lot of positions that a lot of other vehicles wouldn't be able to do, meaning that you can sneak up on enemies and catch them by surprise. And that's pretty much what you're going to be able to do in this machine as well. It does get access to smoke and HE as well. The smokes are going to be useful, the HE is going to be useless because of the size of the 90mm. But you can see how odd this thing is. It's actually quite long for how tall it is. But to give you an idea, it can only really get the turret or to look just over the front road wheel right there. So it has really limited traverse when it comes to how far it can go either side, and as I said, that's literally because of the two guys in the turret. Supposedly, if it is stood still, it can technically go 360, but if it's moving, it can't. We'll have to see how that goes. But the gun itself is going to be completely fine, and you can see the general maneuverability of this thing, even in areas like mudded areas, is pretty good. Like, because it's so light, you don't really dig into a lot of the mud, so you can just keep pushing through really nicely. So the actual mobility of this is going to be really, really good. And at 6.7, you have two really interesting, conflicting, meta ideas in a way. So you've got the heavy tanks, like the T-34, the Tiger II SLA, even stuff like the IS-3 at 7.0, and then you've got a ton of light tanks with decent firepower, the M56 Scorpion, the Ontos, the RU-251, which is slightly higher, and all the stuff like the Mardas and everything like that, even the Ratels, if you want to throw them into the mix. And the ELC joins the light tanks with decent firepower parts, and they're some of my favorite vehicles when it comes to the game, because it basically means that you have a bunch of options that you're normally not available to do when it comes to the heavy tanks, but this machine is missing one of them, which I really think it should have, and that is the scouting. There's no scouting on this vehicle, unfortunately, and that means that if you decide to use it as an ambush vehicle, or if you decide to use it to get into a pretty decent position pretty quickly, what can end up happening is you can sit there the whole game and not really contribute anything to the team, because you'll just be not shooting anything, because there's there's no clear opportunity to be able to shoot something without it shooting back. And then also at the same time, what may happen is you won't be able to sit behind the a hill and scout either. So you might just be sat there doing absolutely nothing, and the moment you peek out is the moment you die, which is why scout vehicles have much more use than some other vehicles in certain scenarios, because in whatever situation they're in the game, even if they are massively outgunned, they can still do something for the team. This gun can't even machine gun anything, It's not able to do that. It's not able to even do that, unfortunately. So just to make this a slightly better experience, I would personally say I'd like to see it have scouting, but at the same time, it has a bunch of other features that at least entice me to play it, especially since I really like this BR and I really like this type of vehicle. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Merciless Reaper, Jerry Provolt, Mega Dino King, Professor X1718, Orange Tail, Sakoshi Tiger, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, Moxie, B. Young, and Derek R., Bareen, Lafouche, and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.